The forbidden questioning. If God knows everything, then why does he allow evil to happen? Could the answer to this question have always been hidden? Since the dawn of humanity, this has been one of the most unsettling and forbidden questions within religions. If God is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnibenevolent, why does suffering exist in the world? This doubt is not new. It has crossed centuries, philosophies, and theologies, but no one embodied it as profoundly as Lucifer, the fallen angel. Before his fall, Lucifer was described as the most beautiful and powerful of angels, a being of light, created to shine before the throne of God. But something happened, something no one dares to speak of clearly. Lucifer questioned. He observed creation and saw something that did not make sense. If God knew everything from the beginning, then he already knew that Lucifer would rebel. He knew that humanity would suffer, that wars would erupt, that the innocent would weep. So why did he go forward with this plan? God's answer was never written, and this is where the story takes an even darker turn. Was Lucifer wrong to question, or did he uncover a flaw within the Creator himself? Ancient records say that Lucifer's questioning alone was enough to trigger his fall. But what if this is not the whole story? Get ready to delve deeper into this forbidden mystery. And before you continue, comment below. Do you think Lucifer was unjustly punished, or was his rebellion an act of arrogance? The Great Judgment, rebellion or truth? What if Lucifer's rebellion was not merely an act of pride, but an attempt to expose something that was never meant to be known? After the questioning, heaven became a courtroom. The angels watched in silence as Lucifer stood before the Creator. He did not rebel immediately. He asked a simple yet devastating question. If you are omniscient, why did you create suffering? The silence that followed was deafening. The other angels averted their eyes. None dared to repeat his words. God could have simply erased Lucifer at that moment, yet he allowed the discussion to continue. And that in itself was a mystery. Religious tradition paints Lucifer as an arrogant being, consumed by his own brilliance. But what if the reality is more complex? What if his rebellion was not a thirst for power, but a refusal to accept something he perceived as a flaw in creation? The issue was greater than a mere doubt. Lucifer understood that if God was truly omniscient, he had already seen every pain, every tear, and every scream before the first human even existed, and yet he went forward with the plan. The punishment was brutal. Lucifer was cast into the abyss, condemned to be the eternal adversary. But this response raises yet another question. If God knew this would happen, why did he allow it? Is free will a true concept or merely an illusion? What really happened during Lucifer's fall? Now it's up to you. Was Lucifer a villain or a martyr of forbidden knowledge? Comment below. Free will, choice or illusion? If God knows everything before it even happens, are our choices truly our own? When Lucifer fell, he was not alone. A third of heaven's angels followed him, but they were not forced. They chose to join the rebellion, or did they? The concept of free will is the foundation of divine justice. If God punished Lucifer without giving him the option to choose, that would not be fair. But if God already knew the outcome before even creating the first angel, did any real choice exist at all? Imagine a filmmaker writing a script. He knows how it begins, how it ends, who the villains and heroes are. Do the characters have the freedom to act, or are they merely following the script? Lucifer realized this too late. He fell because he made a choice, or because that was always the only possible outcome. If God is omniscient, he knew Adam and Eve would eat the forbidden fruit. He knew humanity would fall. He knew wars, plagues, tragedies, and suffering would come. So why allow it? Lucifer did not question God's existence. He questioned his intentions. And for that, he became the adversary. If everything is already written, what does it truly mean to be free? Your opinion matters. Do you believe we have free will, or is everything predetermined? Comment below. The omnipotence dilemma. If God can prevent it, why doesn't he? If a father sees his child running toward the fire, shouldn't he stop them before they get burned? This thought echoed in Lucifer's mind. If God is truly good, why does he allow so much suffering? Wars, diseases, natural disasters, children dying before they even understand what life is. If God has absolute power, why doesn't he intervene? The common answer is that suffering is part of the divine plan, that there is a greater purpose beyond our understanding. But how can a loving God allow pain and injustice? Imagine a ruler with absolute power over his kingdom. He could end hunger, stop wars, and prevent all suffering, but he chooses to do nothing. Would he still be considered good? Lucifer challenged this logic. He wanted answers, and the only response he found was silence. This filled him with rage. If God truly loves his creation, why doesn't he protect the innocent? Some say suffering is a test. Others believe it's a consequence of human choices. But do these answers really justify everything? If an all-powerful God allows evil, can he still be considered entirely good? And you? Do you believe God permits suffering for a greater reason? Or is this the great flaw of creation? Share your opinion in the comments. Free will or indifference? The argument Lucifer refused to accept. If free will justifies suffering, then did God choose to give his creation freedom rather than protect it? This was the great question. Many argue that God does not prevent tragedies because he granted us free will. It would be unfair to force his creations to follow him without choice. But does this explanation truly answer everything? If suffering is the fault of free will, what about tragedies that are not caused by human choices? Earthquakes kill thousands and no human causes them. Babies are born with terminal illnesses. They did not choose this. Tsunamis wipe out entire cities. No one asked for them. If God could prevent these tragedies and chooses not to, is that love or negligence? Lucifer rejected this justification. If God allowed such horrors, then either he did not care or he was not as omnipotent as believed. But if God was not entirely good or not entirely powerful, was he still God? This doubt ate away at creation, and for many it still does. Do you believe that free will truly justifies all the suffering in the world? Or is it just an excuse? Don't forget to leave your like. God's choice, justice, or experiment? If God knows what will happen before it happens, then was every tragedy already written? This is the question that dismantles any argument about free will. Because if God knew everything before creating the world, then he chose to create suffering. Lucifer saw this as a grand divine experiment. God knew that millions would die in wars and diseases. God knew that innocent children would suffer. God knew that billions of people would live and die without ever knowing him. And yet he went through with the plan. Is that justice? Is that kindness? If a scientist created a miniature world and, knowing its inhabitants would suffer horrors, continued the experiment, would he be considered merciful or cruel? Was God's silence the answer? Lucifer refused to accept this logic. He refused to be part of this system. If God chose to allow suffering, then he would choose to challenge God. Do you think everything was already written before it happened? Or does God truly give us choices? Subscribe if you haven't yet. Does free will exist or is it an illusion? If God already knows what we will choose, do we really have a choice? This is the question that shakes the foundations of faith. Because if God already knows the end of the story, then our choices are just pieces in a game that has already been decided. Lucifer looked at humanity and saw a contradiction. God gave us free will, but he already knows how each person will act. God allows us to make choices, but he already knows our fate. God says we can love him freely, but he already knows who will reject him. If everything is already written, then freedom is just an illusion. But if it isn't written, then God is not omniscient, which is worse. Lucifer questioned, if God already knew he would rebel, then why create him? If he already knew billions would suffer, then why allow it? If God knows everything, do you really have a choice? Or are you just following a script? Share your opinion in the comments. Subscribe to the channel to continue this journey. The ultimate question, is suffering a test or divine indifference? If a father knows his child will fall into an abyss and does nothing to stop it, is he loving or cruel? This is the question raised by the celestial adversary. Is human suffering just an accident along the way? Or is it an essential part of reality itself? And if it is essential, wouldn't that make the Creator at least complicit in human pain? The great tragedies of history reinforce this question. The Holocaust, genocides, plagues, wars, natural disasters. If God is omniscient and omnipotent, he saw them before they happened. If he did not intervene, then he allowed them to occur. Some esoteric philosophies argue that God does not act because suffering serves a spiritual purpose, a path of learning. But who truly learns from a starving child or an entire city wiped out by an earthquake? Are these simply lessons, or is it divine indifference? And what if humanity's true enemy is not Lucifer, but a creator who set up a game in which he alone defines the rules and the punishments? If God is omniscient, omnipotent, and just, how can evil continue to exist under his watch? Could Lucifer, then, be the one who questions the system and offers humanity the chance to see the truth? If you want to keep exploring this reflection, comment your opinion below and share this video so more people can join the discussion. Let's dive into the most controversial answers about the divine, nature and its contradictions. Get ready for the unexpected, the silence of God and the echo of tragedies. If God can prevent suffering, why does he choose not to? The history of humanity is marked by immeasurable tragedies, wars, famine, disease, natural disasters. Millions of innocent lives have been lost over the centuries, often without any apparent explanation. For some, this is the ultimate proof that God is absent. For others, a test of faith. But for Lucifer, this was the great flaw in divine omniscience. If God knows of all tragedies before they even happen, why does he not prevent them? This question has been debated for centuries by philosophers, theologians, and skeptics alike. Some believe that free will justifies all suffering because God created a world where freedom is more important than the absence of pain. But does this explanation truly satisfy? What if suffering is more than just a side effect of human freedom? What if there is something deeper, a hidden reason behind God's apparent silence in the face of tragedy? Ancient texts suggest that human suffering is not just allowed but necessary for a greater purpose. Are we mere pieces in a cosmic game, where our pain is just a small detail in a narrative we will never fully understand? While theologians try to justify divine passivity, doubt spreads like wildfire, and Lucifer, who has always questioned the Creator, may have found his greatest weapon, human suffering, as evidence of a God who watches but does not act. If this truth is too disturbing to accept, then perhaps that is precisely why so many avoid speaking about it. And you? Do you believe suffering has a purpose? Or is it just God's silence in the face of pain? Comment your opinion and share this video with someone who needs to hear this truth. The final judgment and the truth that cannot be ignored. What if the answer has always been right in front of us, but we were taught not to see it? God's silence in the face of tragedies, human suffering as a piece in a cosmic game, freedom being sold as a gift when it might only be an illusion. These questions have haunted philosophers, theologians, and believers for centuries. But the most disturbing question of all has yet to be asked: what if Lucifer was right? What if God, in his omniscience, never intended to prevent suffering? What if from the very beginning this was always the plan? A plan in which good and evil do not exist as opposites, but as gears in the same machine? At the moment of his rebellion, Lucifer did not just question God's authority, he questioned his morality. He never denied the Creator's existence. On the contrary, he knew him better than anyone. But upon witnessing humanity's suffering, every tear shed, every unanswered prayer, every tragedy that could have been prevented, he asked himself, is this justice, or merely indifference disguised as wisdom? The sacred texts speak of a final judgment, a moment when all will be called to account. But who will truly be judged? Mankind for its failures, or God for his inaction? Lucifer may be the accuser, but the final answer was never his. The answer has always been yours. What do you believe? Does God allow suffering because it serves a greater purpose? Or was this always the reality he chose to create? Comment your thoughts, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to reflect on this truth.